Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. Get her off the property, the man snapped, waving his hand like I was some kind of pest. This is a private estate, not a public park. I stood my ground on the front steps of the mansion, the breeze pulling at my coat as if trying to shield me from what was coming. My grandson, Mason, gripped my hand tighter. His little face scrunched in confusion, watching the man in the designer suit bark orders like a spoiled king. That man, Chase Preston. Wealthy, loud, full of swagger. You could smell the entitlement on him from a mile away. He didn't build this place. He bought it. And now, he thought he owned everything that came with it, even the memories. You need to leave, Chase said again, slower this time, like I didn't speak English. Now. I grew up in this house, I said firmly, my voice calm, but sharp as broken glass. This was my family's home. He threw his head back and laughed, not politely. No, this was the kind of laugh that said you're a joke. Oh really? Chase sneered. Did you also date Elvis and walk on the moon? Lady, this place is worth over $6 million. People like you visit mansions, you don't own them. His words hit harder than they should have. Not because they were true, but because they were so confidently wrong. I clenched my jaw. I played under that oak tree, I said, pointing to the backyard. My father planted it the year I was born. I took my prom pictures on these steps. And I watched my mother take her final breath in the room upstairs. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. The other just stared at me, like I was crazy. Chase walked closer, now only a few feet from me. Look, Grandma, he said with a smirk, this place isn't your little fairy tale anymore. You want a tour or something? I'll charge you half price. Mason looked up at me, eyes wide. Grandma, what's going on? I squeezed his hand. We're standing on our past, sweetheart. Chase scoffed. Your past is gone. Get over it. I didn't blink. I reached into my purse and slowly pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased, worn, but still legible. I unfolded it carefully and held it up. What's that? Chase asked, amused. The original deed, I said. Signed in 1967. By my father, Richard McAllister. This house was built by his hands. Chase's face twitched. The younger security guard stepped forward and glanced at the paper. Mr. Preston, it does have her name on it. Don't be stupid, Chase snapped. That deed's 100 years old. 58, I corrected. Then I pulled out a second document, this one in a sealed envelope. A legal petition, I said. Filed yesterday. The county has agreed to reopen the land dispute. Turns out your title transfer has holes. Chase stepped back. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. His smile was still there, but it was tighter now, nervous. Performative. You're bluffing, he said. I don't bluff, Chase, I replied. Especially not about my home. He looked over at the guards. Get her out of here. But they didn't move. The younger one had his phone out, Googling something. Sir, he said slowly, she's telling the truth. A motion was filed. Her name's all over it. Chase turned back to me, his jaw locked. Who even are you? I looked him dead in the eyes. My name is Eleanor McAllister. And I didn't just live in this mansion, I was born in it. Raised in it. And I'll be damned if I let some rich brat with no sense of history treat it like a vacation rental. He barked out a laugh. Lady, you can't be serious. I stepped forward one last time, right up to his face. My voice low, but clear. You laughed when I said I used to own this mansion. I held up the documents. Until I showed you the papers. He stared at me like he'd just seen a ghost. I turned, walking down those front steps like I belonged, because I did. Mason followed close, looking up at me like I'd just told him a secret no one else knew. "Grandma," he whispered, "was he scared?" I smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Not yet, baby," I said. "But he will be. Because this isn't just about one house. This is about the truth. About roots. About history that money can't erase. They took everything from my family once. But I didn't fight then. This time, I will." People think money is what makes a mansion beautiful. The gold, the chandeliers, the imported tiles. They're wrong. What makes a house a home is who fills it. And when I was a little girl, this mansion was bursting with love. With noise. With life. My father, Richard McAllister, wasn't born into money. He built his name one deal at a time: real estate, agriculture, a dozen ventures all over Georgia. He didn't have a fancy college degree, but he had instincts, grit, and a soul that believed in family first. And when he finished building this house, brick by brick, he named it after my mother. Rose Hall, he called it. Because her favorite flowers climbed the walls like they belonged. I was just 6 when we moved in. My older brother, Nathan, was already off to boarding school, my father's idea. "Discipline builds greatness," he used to say. But with me, he was different. He let me stay home. Said I had the heart of the house in me. Maybe that's why I remember every inch of it. The way the staircase creaked on the 5th step. The garden that bloomed only in the corners where sunlight hit just right. The piano room where I learned to play Chopin with trembling fingers. We weren't royalty. But in that house, I felt like a princess, not the kind with crowns, but the kind who believed her life could stay beautiful forever. I was wrong. It started slow. My father had a stroke when I was 15. And while he recovered, Nathan came home, supposedly to help. But he wasn't the same brother I remembered. Something had hardened him. Cold eyes. Short temper. A hunger that didn't care who it hurt. One night, I overheard him on the phone, whispering numbers, land deeds, offers. Selling things that didn't belong to him. I told my mother. She looked away, silent. I told my father. He tried to stand, collapsed halfway. And just like that, Nathan stepped in with power of attorney. Said he'd handle things while Dad recovered. But he never intended to save anything. He sold half the farmland to a foreign investor. Took out loans in my father's name. Transferred assets without blinking. And when I confronted him, he just smiled. "You don't understand business, Ellie," he said. "This place, it's dead weight. You want to save the roses? Then start clipping the roots." I slapped him. I'd never hit anyone in my life, but that day, my hand moved on its own. He didn't flinch. Just chuckled. "Childish," he muttered, and walked away. By the time my father passed, less than 2 years later, Nathan had gutted nearly everything. He sold the house quietly, buried the paperwork under shell corporations, and vanished to New York with a model on each arm. I remember the day the moving trucks came. My mother stood on the porch, her suitcase trembling in her hand. "They took it all," she whispered. "They took my name." We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment downtown. No garden. No music. Just echoes. I worked 2 jobs through college, cleaned home, that were smaller than mine had been, but colder. I made peace with the silence. But I never forgot. And I never forgave. People said I should move on. That houses are just wood and nails. That memories live inside us, not in buildings. But they were wrong. Because when you've bled for a place, when you've watched your family break in its halls, when you've loved every window and door like an old friend, that place becomes part of your bones. I visited once, years later. Just stood across the street, pretending I was out for a walk. The new owners had painted it beige. Ripped out the rose bushes. It looked hollow. Like it knew it didn't belong to them. That's when I made a promise. One day, no matter how long it took, I'd come back. Not for revenge, but for restoration. For truth. I kept tabs. Watched the title change hands every few years. Wealthy buyers, flippers, even one reality show couple who thought it'd be fun to turn it into a ghost-themed Airbnb. And then came Chase Preston. Arrogant. Loaded. Loud. A name with no roots. He bought it from a trust without even visiting. I read the deed transfer online, and my heart dropped. But then I saw something else, a clerical error. One that no one had caught. The sale had skipped a key record from 1984. And that record still had my name on it. Eleanor McAllister. A name tied to ownership. It wasn't over. So I dug. Filed. Collected evidence. Contacted a lawyer who remembered my father from decades ago. And last week, for the first time in 40 years, I walked back onto that land with legal standing. I told Mason I just wanted to see it again. But deep down, I wanted him to feel it. To understand who we were. What we lost. And now? Now Chase Preston's laugh will fade. His smirk will vanish. Because the past he thought was buried is standing right in front of him. And I'm not leaving. Not this time. You're bluffing, Chase spat, slamming the file shut like it meant nothing. This paper doesn't mean squat. I didn't even blink. Then take a closer look at page 9, I said, folding my hands over my lap. Specifically the clause under secondary title registration, subsection B. He scoffed, but he turned back to it anyway. I watched his eyes flick across the page. And I saw it, that flicker of panic he tried to hide. I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, he muttered. But I bought this property legally. Fair and square. And yet, I said, leaning in just enough, you bought it without a clean title. This land was never fully released by my father's estate. You bought a hollow shell with a forged signature buried in the chain of ownership. His jaw clenched. For a man who flaunted power like perfume, Chase Preston didn't know what to do with someone who fought back without raising her voice. He stood up. You think you can come in here, gray hair, sad story, and scare me with old paper? Lady, I'd eaten people like you for breakfast. I stood too. And yet here I am, I said. Still standing. He laughed again, dry, defensive. You know what? Fine. Let's take it to court. You want to drag your sad little name through a legal firestorm? Be my guest. But I'm warning you, I play to win. I looked him dead in the eye. So did my father. That night, I sat in my rental car outside the property gates. The wind howled through the trees like the house was whispering to me, begging me not to leave it behind again. I clutched the old black and white photo in my hand, the one of me as a child, sitting on the porch beside my father. His arm around my shoulder. Both of us smiling like nothing could ever fall apart. They'll try to crush you, Ellie, I heard his voice echo in my memory. But your blood runs deeper than their paper. If they bought the land, you hold its soul. I took a breath, and dialed. Carter? I said. It's Eleanor. We're filing an injunction. The next week was war. Chase sent his team of lawyers like attack dogs. Slick suits. Sharp tongues. And the moment I stepped into that courtroom, every one of them looked at me like I was a joke. An old woman clinging to a fantasy. Your Honor, his lead attorney said, we respectfully move to dismiss. The plaintiff's claim is based on a 40-year-old filing error, which has no enforceable authority in the current title registry. My lawyer, Carter Delaney, stood without flinching. Respectfully, Your Honor, that's incorrect. The filing in question was never properly closed. Per the 1982 Georgia Property Act, unresolved estate assets are subject to heir claim if unchallenged for more than 35 years. Miss McAllister holds that right, and the defendant ignored it during acquisition. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, nodded. "I'll allow discovery. This case proceeds." Chase was in the back, arms crossed, seething. His confidence was cracking. I could see it. And every time I passed him, I smiled. But the truth? I was terrified. I was up against a man who could bury me in legal fees alone. A man with investors, developers, entire banks behind him. He had resources I couldn't dream of. All I had was memory. And will. And Mason. Every evening, he'd bring me tea while I studied court documents. Sat beside me in silence while I relived every detail of the home I once loved. "Why are you really doing this, Grandma?" he asked one night. "It's just a house." "No," I said softly. "It's a promise. One that was broken. One that deserves to be made whole." He looked at me for a long time. "I believe you." A week before the final hearing, Chase made his move. He offered me a settlement, hush money, basically. A sum that would make most people retire early. He even had the nerve to hand-deliver the check. "I don't hate you," he said. "I just don't care. I bought the house because I could. You want to keep fighting? Fine. But everyone forgets eventually. And when you're gone, I'll still be here." I looked down at the check. Then I tore it clean in half. "I'm not afraid of being forgotten," I said. "I'm afraid of letting people like you erase everything we stood for." He called me crazy. But his hand shook when he left. The court date arrived. My hands trembled as I walked to the witness stand. Not from nerves, but from weight. The weight of every rose my mother planted. Every bedtime story told in the attic. Every crack in the stone wall my father patched with his bare hands. I told the court what that house meant. Not just to me, but to my family, to history, to truth. And I showed the proof, the deed my father never revoked. The letters. The contracts. The map my father drew by hand in 1976 with a single note scribbled in ink. "For Eleanor. Always." The room fell silent. Even Chase didn't move. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was firm. "This court recognizes the plaintiff's rightful claim to the property under estate retention statutes. All current occupants are hereby ordered to vacate. The property will be transferred back to Eleanor McAllister." My knees almost buckled. I had done it. Not for revenge. Not even for pride. But for closure. And for the first time in decades, Rose Hall was mine again. The gates creaked open like they recognized me. Rust lined the iron, and weeds had overtaken the old stone path, but it was still home. Even after all these years. Even after being gutted and stripped and handed off like some real estate chip in a poker game. I stepped out of the car slowly. The air smelled like pine and soil, and something else, too. A memory maybe. One that lived between the porch floorboards, in the breeze whispering through the trees. Mason followed behind me, phone in one hand, jaw slack. "This is really it?" he asked, glancing up at the two-story frame. "This is it," I whispered. We walked to the front steps. The wood groaned under our feet. My fingers traced the edge of the banister, rough and cracked with time. But it was still the same wood my father sanded himself, one summer afternoon, shirtless, sunburned, humming to himself as I painted the porch swing blue. I turned the key. The door stuck for a moment, then gave in with a low sigh. Like the house exhaled when it saw me. Inside, it was colder than I remembered. Empty. Silent. The new floors Chase had installed were sterile. The white paint was crisp but heartless. They'd torn out the fireplace, my mother's favorite spot, replaced it with a wall-mounted TV no one had ever watched. I walked in anyway. Every step felt sacred. Every corner, a ghost. Mason said nothing. Just walked beside me with quiet reverence, like he knew this wasn't a tour, it was a funeral, and a rebirth, all in one. We climbed the stairs. My old bedroom was smaller than I remembered. The window still faced east, where the sun used to flood in and wake me up before my alarm. My father said that room was lucky. He built it facing the sunrise on purpose. It's a little crooked, Mason said, tilting his head. I smiled. It always was. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the old dining room, surrounded by boxes and blueprints and dust. I ran my fingers over old photographs I'd stored away in a climate locker in Savannah. My mother in her gardening gloves. My father fixing the roof with a cigarette behind his ear. Me, on my 10th birthday, wearing a paper crown, surrounded by cousins now buried or scattered. It wasn't just a house. It was a time machine. It was a mirror. It was every reason I kept going. Mason finally came down, bleary-eyed. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. He sat beside me and picked up one of the photos. "You think I could ever live here?" he asked. That stopped me. "Why do you ask that?" He hesitated, then said, "Because I think I need this, Grandma. I need something that's real. Something that doesn't change every year, every trend, every app. You fought for this place, not just for you. For us. Right?" I looked at him, really looked at him. And I saw it. The weight of the world pressing on someone too young to carry it. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I did." The next morning, the renovation crew arrived. Mason called in a few favors from friends who owed him for old music videos or short films they'd shot. I tapped into what little savings I had left, and we agreed to do most of the work ourselves. Not because we had to, but because it felt right. We stripped down the walls. We found the original wood underneath, still breathing, still strong. We repainted the porch swing. We planted roses in the back like my mother used to. Chase tried to sue one more time. But this time, his case got thrown out before it even hit the docket. The judge's statement was clear. You can't buy what doesn't want to be sold. Weeks passed. One afternoon, I found Mason sitting on the porch, legs stretched out, sketchbook in his lap. "You okay?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "I think I finally know what kind of man I want to be," he said. "Oh?" "Someone who builds something that lasts." I didn't say anything. I just sat beside him. Let the silence speak. Because truth is, it wasn't about revenge. Or pride. Or even legacy. It was about remembering who we were, so we could finally become who we were meant to be. We were hosting our first dinner at the mansion. Mason insisted on it. He said it was time we filled the house with noise again, laughter, clinking glasses, music vibrating through the floors like it used to. I wasn't sure I was ready. But when I stood in that kitchen, stirring my mama's old pot of gumbo, wearing her apron with the faded sunflowers, something clicked in my chest. Something that had been locked away for decades. We set up a long table outside under the oak trees. String lights overhead, mismatched chairs, old jazz on the record player. No planners, no fancy waiters, no catered nonsense. Just us. Family. Friends. Neighbors who remembered this house when it was alive. And Mason, he was glowing. He brought a girl. Her name was Riley. She was polite, bright-eyed, and smart as a whip. The kind of girl who actually listened, not just waited for her turn to speak. She helped set the table, wiped her hands on her jeans, and called me Miss Eleanor with a sweet southern drawl. For the first time in a long while, I let myself hope. But you know life. It doesn't let you bow out peacefully. Just as the last candle was lit and the cornbread hit the table, I heard tires crunching gravel. A fancy new black Escalade pulled up to the driveway like it owned the place. And out stepped Chase. In his overpriced suit. With his smug little sneer. I locked eyes with him. My jaw tightened. Mason stood up slowly. What's he doing here? Chase clapped once. Loud. Mocking. Well, well, well. Looks like the museum's open for business again. Some of the neighbors turned toward us. It got quiet fast. I stood, wiping my hands on a napkin. You weren't invited. I didn't come for food, he said. I came for answers. I folded my arms. You got your answers in court. What else do you want, Chase? He laughed, a bitter little chuckle. You really think you won? You think some dusty inheritance and a judge's pity is all it takes? You think this place will fix what's broken in you? I took a slow breath, looked around at the guests, my people. My roots. My story. Then I stepped closer to him. Let me tell you something, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I was 6 years old when my mama taught me how to gut a fish right here on that porch. I was 10 when I watched my daddy hammer that fence with blistered hands. I was 17 when I kissed my first love behind that shed. And I was 30 when I watched this house get ripped out from under me. Chase blinked, confused. I pulled a folded paper from my apron pocket. The original deed. My name. My father's signature. Notarized. Dated. Stamped. This house wasn't a gift, I said. It was a fight. And I earned it. Piece by piece. Courtroom by courtroom. Brick by brick. You laughed when I said I used to own this mansion. I unfolded the paper and held it up. Until I showed you the papers. The crowd gasped. A neighbor even clapped. Chase scoffed, trying to save face. This isn't over, Eleanor. No, Chase, I said. It is. You had your chance to do the right thing. You chose greed. You chose lies. I chose to survive. Now I'm choosing peace. You can choose the door. Silence. Then, surprisingly, he turned and left. Just like that. No storm out. No threats. Just a man who realized the house had more heart than he ever would. Later that night, after the crowd cleared and the dishes were washed, I found Mason sitting on the porch swing, Riley's head on his shoulder. He looked up at me, soft smile on his face. You okay? I asked. He nodded. Better than okay. You? I paused, then joined them. I think I finally understand what my daddy meant when he said a house remembers, I whispered. Mason turned to me. What do you mean? This place, it's not just wood and nails. It's a witness. It saw who we were. It saw what we lost. And it's gonna see what we become next. He nodded. And in that moment, I knew the story wasn't ending here. It was beginning again. A new generation. A new purpose. A mansion that once held silence, now echoing with love, laughter, and truth. Because some battles are about more than property. They're about who we are when no one believes in us. And the legacy we leave behind when we finally believe in ourselves.